This is a song I wrote 25 years ago. From the perspective of the stranger. I'm a funny kinda guy. I'm a gentle kinda guy. You know life is strange, or maybe I don't see things the same as you. Try not to judge and you might find people have less to hide. I'm a lucky kinda guy, and I'm a lonesome kinda guy. You know life is strange, or maybe I don't see things the same as you. Try not to judge and you might find people have less to hide. And I'm a dykey kinda guy. Yeah, I'm a curvy kinda guy. 'Cause life is strange and maybe I don't see things the same as you. Try not to judge and you might find people have less to hide. Be true to me. Be true and you might hear me when I'm changing, when I change my sides. 'Cause I'm a funny kinda guy. I'm so grateful to Pastor Amara and for this church for being interested and aware of my experience as a transgender person and minister. Many of you will know that there's the right-wing Christian church at the moment is orchestrating a big attack on transgender rights, legally, healthcare, and I think a huge part of what is motivating this is a serious lack of understanding. So first of all, thank you for giving me voice to voice a different Christian message. But secondly, I hope that me sharing some of my own faith experience might increase compassion for folks that don't have very much gender variance in who they are. And before I delve into my own experience, I want to say that I clearly cannot speak for all transgender people. The folks that I meet now, especially the young people, they call me a dinosaur because I transitioned 25 years ago. And I'm just one person, one story. And also, my story is a human story. So perhaps you have not had any kind of non-binary or gender struggle, but I'm sure there will be things that I share that are universal. And I'm hoping that it will be relevant and resonant for your own insights and experience, regardless of who you are. Just in case you're not part of the church, but you're in the Zoom, I'm going to post in the chat the link to the documentary that was made about my transition, and it was released in 2005, I think, a long time ago. So I should tell you a little bit about me. And so I am, how old am I? Coming up 50, 48 this year. And I was born a girl. My name was Ruth, third child, first daughter after two older brothers. My mother was delighted. But right from the start, she had some intuitions or experiences. My godmother, right, when I came out in my early 20s, sent all these letters back to my mother that she'd written when I was a baby. Say, my mother had written, "Sometimes I look at my daughter and she looks like a little boy." Or she'd say things like this. So she must have known when I was a neonate and then completely forgot all about that. I was the biggest tomboy ever. I refused to wear a dress unless it was green. I I had a bit of an okay time in primary because I went to a rural primary school, and it was so small that having friends that were boys was not unusual. And my mother is and father are both unusual in their gender, and they allowed me to be quite different. Then I got older, and society and my peers started to police my behaviour. And from probably the age of about 11 onward, I really, really struggled with being Ruth, being a girl, what was expected of me, how I felt about myself. I felt very misunderstood. When I was 15, I told my friends that I was bisexual and learned about very butch lesbians, these very masculine lesbians. And I was like, oh my God, they're amazing. And learned as much as I could about Radcliffe Hall and that whole beautiful lineage of very masculine women, many of whom did a lot for the feminist movement. But the piece of that I couldn't reconcile very easily was I didn't feel very comfortable with my lack of femininity. And eventually I came across the idea from Native American culture that there were people who were two-spirit, that had male and female spirit. And this fascinated me. And I learnt about over in Canada and America, there's transgender people. And I was like, oh, because I knew about transsexuals. They were pretty demonized in the newspapers. But I knew that there were some people that changed their physical body. I just didn't realize I was one of them, because inside me, there was a strength of masculine and feminine. I was a non-binary person. Just happened to be more male than female. This is a whistle-stop tour of a whole life, so I'm not doing it justice. You'll really need to watch my documentary if you want to get some of the pieces. But where I want to get to is the spiritual learning along the journey. When I was about 21, I started to live as Simon Ruth and to be more masculine, and it was extremely difficult. I pretty much got made homeless. One time I got fired, I got attacked in the street. I found life very difficult. I received a lot of hostility. And into that mix, the loving kindness that was shown to me was very, very important. Before I transitioned, I wasn't really able to take up much space. I was so awkward in myself, and so much energy was spent to navigating how to be in public. I never felt safe or welcomed in public places. I only felt comfortable if people already knew me. I wasn't so able to show up for either myself or others. And now I live with so much gratitude that I was born in this time, that I have testosterone that is given to me, that I can look like this. I am so much more comfortable in the world. And inside, I still feel non-binary, but my life is much easier as Simon, and I'm so grateful that I've had that blessing to be able to choose this. Inside, I think the truth is that my emotional intelligence and heart is both Ruth and Simon. I was Ruth for, 23 years, and I've been Simon for 26. Outside, though, we operate in a mostly cisgender. That means people that were born with one gender that's in alignment with their physical body, and they're comfortable with that. In the outside world, there's still a lot of structuralization around two camps of male and female. There's many boxes we choose, but I'm just talking about genders today. So, what are some of the spiritual goodies that this unusual path that my soul gave me has offered when it comes to spiritual insight? Well, first of all, this is the biggest one. I wrote this in the description. A God that doesn't include all is just too small to believe in. A God that doesn't include all is too small to believe in. One of the ways I learned about God was by rejecting the false God. I just knew in my heart that God is not an angry parent that sends people to hell for being bad. True, we humans can create hell on earth to one another or to ourselves. But this conditional loving God is just untrue. And it points to its opposite, that love and life, like the rainforest, is diversity, includes it all. And thank God. The people who Bible bashed me growing up, yes, I got Bible bashed a lot. People said I was too nice to go to hell. I was an easy target. I was clearly had gender issues. I was clearly queer. I got Bible bashed a lot. What a bad use of a Bible, by the way, to bash other people. Anyway, so the people who Bible bashed me didn't make me straight. In fact, they just made God more gay, diverse, inclusive, and fabulous. As a queer person, I know deep in my bones that the judgy, angry, parental, righteous God is just not good enough, not diverse enough, not mature enough, or praiseworthy. In fact, it's ugly. So let's ask ourselves, is our God beautiful, compassionate, inclusive, playful, expansive, changing, and ever transitioning? Is our God dismantling racism and patriarchy with flair? Does our God dance? In other words, is our God freeing and beautiful? You can absolutely learn about something based on its absence because it points to what should be there. The second thing I'd like to share with you about my transgender experience and how it really brought God to me was hospitality, that passage. How incredibly important it is. The passage names hospitality to be a prerequisite for heaven on earth. We all know about hospitality and its incredible gift because we've all experienced incidences of being unwelcome. And for me growing up, it was a culture of unwelcome, a pervasive and abundant anti-queer stance. As a young adult, I was literally the last person anybody would sit next to on the bus. Now I'm the first. I went from being the unsafe person to the safe person. I always remember to look for the person who is ignored, ostracized, and unsafe on the bus or the train or the ferry. And that survival-fueled hypervigilance will probably be in my nervous system until I move on from this human suit. You know, if aggressive macho behavior appears anywhere near me, my body knows it before it hits my ears. And sometimes I wonder if my empathic wiring that makes me a good counselor is actually not a charisma, but instead a survival strategy that I learned as a child. Back 25 years ago, right? I was living in Glasgow, biggest city of Scotland. It's one of the most violent cities in Western Europe. I experienced a phenomenal lack of hospitality when I started to become more masculine. Couldn't find housing, found it difficult to find work, had found it difficult to go out beyond the queer ghetto. Little things like buying your lunch at the baker's became very difficult. I remember one woman would not give me my change until I told her what gender I was. It's not just being kicked out of bathrooms, which is a whole other thing. Thank God the church has 2 non-binary bathrooms. Yes, excellent. Into this climate 25 years ago of disrespect and othering, moments of true hospitality landed so deeply. Once I came out as trans and started sharing my life, Random people, work colleagues, neighbors, kind souls that didn't know me but knew a little bit of my story, went out of their way to ensure I was safe, housed, chaperoned, and valued. And there was a time when my family were so upset that they couldn't show up for me when some of the difficult stuff was happening. And these people came. Receiving hospitality in this context changed how I felt about myself, changed my assumptions about everyday, normal, amazing people. I found out that there are so many more people who are extremely kind and compassionate for no reason whatsoever than bigots. There's another part of that story of Jesus sending out the disciples, and if hospitality or God's Spirit is not present, they are to dust off their sandals and leave. I find this an important instruction around listening to intuition, listening to where God is moving, and that also where something is coming to an end, where something is constricting, like, say, perhaps marriage, or for me, trying to grow up as an adult. As she was becoming harder and harder, I needed to look to where Spirit was leading me, and it wasn't where I was. I needed to go out into the unknown. The third piece that being trans really helped bring me was the importance of honoring the wisdom of the soul. I think probably this will be the last thing I have time to talk about today, but we will have a Q&R short in a few weeks where you can ask me lots of questions. Back 25 years ago, nobody knew what I was doing in exploring my masculinity and changing genders. Few people could advise me. Nobody could tell me it was going to get better. And there were no role models. So my guidance really came from my soul. You could say that it came from therapy or self-exploration, but really all those activities were just making space for the soul to express itself. Now, in this culture and time, we tend to think of ourselves as our ego, our persona, and not as our immortal soul. Our soul, with its heart-infused wisdom, is not limited by time and place. We're taught that the soul is eternal. And I believe that our soul is the part of us that can tap into the collective conscious of humanity, or even beyond. There's a lovely Taizé chant. It goes like this. My soul is at rest in God alone. My salvation comes from God. My soul is at rest in God alone. My salvation comes from God. Nowhere is this chant more true for me than when I am witnessing nature. The moonlight fleetingly held on the ocean. The enormous oak tree harboring so much life that I'm standing underneath. This is where my soul rests in the universe. You know, Rumi says the universe is not outside of you. I'll get to him again later in a minute. I believe that the soul and its deep peace, that's why I described the moonlight on the ocean or the oak tree, the deep peace that accompanies our soul in moments like that. It's the soul that can guide us towards God's purpose in our life. I do think that we have a soul compass. And some professions or people tap into that more than others. Perhaps artists or people who work with people like teachers or therapists, maybe they tap into the soul more. But for most of us, we stumble upon the soul's wisdom when we are stuck and in dire straits, when we're not able to see the outcome. For example, should we get divorced? Should I leave this job? Should I adopt this child? In recent years, I've spent a great deal of time learning from the mystic Saint Teresa of Avila, a wonderful and odd woman who was a prioress, church reformer, and writer back in Spain 500 years ago. She goes on and on about the importance of keeping the soul in God. They were quite worried about eternal damnation back then. And she says some very interesting things for us. She says, God dwells in the very center of the soul. And that place in us, at the center of our soul, is God's heaven. And God placed it there to dwell in. So you are God's heaven. I love that idea. She says that we enter the soul through prayer, and she means dialogue and intimacy with God, not just rote prayers. So we enter the soul through prayer, self-knowledge, and humility. And she says that most of us don't ever enter into the mansion of the soul. We get so caught up in the external everyday. Thus, most of us do not enter into true relationship with God and are not able to reflect divine light. So maybe in some ways I should be grateful that I had no role models and had to look within to find out how to be in the world. Here's a quote from the New King James Bible. I don't normally quote the King James, but when I went hunting for it, that's what it was. The kingdom of God does not come with observation, nor will they say, see here or see there, for indeed the kingdom of God is within you. That's from Luke 17:21. Or here's Rumi, the universe is not outside of you. Look inside yourself. Everything that you want, you already are. In my own need to reconcile where my dissonance and dysmorphia was coming from, I needed to go deep within to find both guidance and sanctuary. And when I went within, I was quite astonished to find guidance and knowing in the form of a feeling like a deep peace or arrival. My soul spoke to me through imagery, symbols, and it was accompanied by a feeling or acceptance. It wasn't just ideas that jumped through my thoughts. This is very difficult for me to describe, so perhaps I should give you an example. I went to therapy because my mum said she wouldn't accept my change if I didn't go to therapy, and at first I told her quite rudely to go away, but then I realised I was a big mess and I could really do with some free therapy. So I went to this wonderful therapist called Liz, who I'm still in touch with. She lives back in Scotland. And she taught me to visualise my timeline and to fly over my life as if I was a bird. And we were looking at the fact that I didn't know whether to take testosterone or not. That's the artificial hormone that I've been taking for 25 years that makes my voice low and my beard and my muscle, all that stuff, all that good stuff. But I didn't know whether I should take testosterone or not. I didn't know what it would be like. I didn't know what it would feel like. I was frightened. And I couldn't see into my future. I could see my past, but I couldn't see into my future. It was completely shrouded in fog, which was fear. So I jumped into this imaginary television set that was my life and vacuumed up all the fog and managed to get rid of it. And all of a sudden noticed that I was standing in myself, looking back to me in the therapy room. And in an instant, I knew if I could see myself from the future, I could jump and look along my timeline and see me in the future. So I did that in a fraction of a second. I saw myself. I looked exactly as I look now, the same as before, but with a beard, and I was older. And in that moment, I knew to take testosterone, that this was the right path for me. It wasn't a logical thing. It was a soul knowing, and I honored it. There's so much wisdom here. And I think it's really important to us in our calling and in us showing up in our fullness that we honor the soul. Okay, maybe I will end here with a little quote from John O'Donohue. This is from an audiobook to bless the space between us. Plato said in the Symposium that one of the greatest privileges of a human life is to become midwife to the birth of the soul in another. I've talked about that before. But he continues. When your soul awakens, you begin to truly inherit your life. You leave the kingdom of fake surfaces, repetitive talk, and weary roles, and slip deeper into the true adventure of who you are and who you are called to become. The greatest friend of the soul is the unknown. Richard Rohr has a great amount to say about this that I don't have time to get to, so I'll just dump it in the chat about overcoming righteous thinking. Maybe if you invite me back, I will talk about part 2 of aligning with love instead of our ideas about love. That's for another day. Donna Markova says, what is loved reveals its loveliness. And that is part of why this work of improving hospitality and welcome brings life, brings fullness, and is essential. So thank you for listening to what I have to say. I'm going to reinforce this now with a song, which I've tweaked one of the words. You're going to see a word in red that I've added just to playfully bring the non-binary in. This is written by a friend of mine, well, acquaintance of mine, Bernadette Farrell. And I think that she wouldn't mind me queering her words a little bit. God, beyond all dreams, you have stirred in us a memory. You have placed your powerful spirit in the heart of humankind. All around us we have known you. All creation lives to hold you. In our living and our dying, we are bringing you to birth. God, beyond all names, you have made us in your image. We are like you, we reflect you, we are woman and we are man. All around us we have known you, all creation lives to hold you. In our living and our dying, we are bringing you to birth. God, beyond all words, all creation tells your story. You have shaken with our laughter, and you have trembled with our tears. All around us we have known you, all creation lives to hold you. In our living and our dying, we are bringing you to birth. God, beyond all time, you are laboring within us. We are moving, we are changing, in your spirit ever new. All around us we have known you, all creation lives to hold you. In our living and our dying, we are bringing you to birth. God of tender care, you have cradled us in goodness, you have mothered us in wholeness, you have loved us into birth. All around us we have known you, all creation lives to hold you. In our living and our dying, we are bringing you to birth. Thank you for listening. Please take what is useful and leave the rest.